Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to the Neurology of Transformation workshop. As you're coming in, a couple of tools you'll need today. You should have got some emails about it, but some of you just signed up, so you might not know that yet. But something that you like the smell of, an essential oil, coffee beans, lemon, anything like that that your system likes the smell of. And then if you have a vibrating object like a Z-Vibe or a vibrating toothbrush, grab that. If you don't have it, no big deal. You can do all these tools without it. But if you want to take a minute to grab that, go ahead and do that. Okay, so I know a lot of you are here because you want to learn about the Neuro-Somatic Intelligence Certification course, and we're going to tell you all about that at the end. And also at the end, we will open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll get to them the best we can as we're going through the workshop. But if they don't get answered there, don't worry, there'll be plenty of time. I'm going to hang out and answer questions at the end, and we'll get through the bulk of the material first. So today we're really going to be talking about change, the neurology of change, which is exciting. Because as Matt's wife, Kathy says, neuroscience is the science of hope because it teaches us about neuroplasticity. And that means that we are changing and adapting all of the time. This is how our brains and our nervous systems work. It never stops. We keep changing until we die. We probably change more after that. So we're never really stuck. We just have to understand how to work with our brain and our nervous system in order to drive that change in a positive direction in a way that aligns with our goals and our intentions. And when we understand how to work with our own operating system, then we have agency, right? We have some power, some capability, and we can help ourselves have that capability to positively adapt to the stress of change, to create intentional change, lasting change that we want for ourselves and our lives, because so often we get stuck in that cycle, right? Of taking new actions or pushing into new behaviors and then backsliding with pain, with avoidance behaviors, shutting down, fatigue, old patterns. And if you're a practitioner, I know there's a lot of practitioners here today, you can also see that cycle happen with your clients, right? They start to make these changes and then they get pulled back. And that can be really hard as a practitioner too. It can lead to a lot of burnout and exhaustion on that end. So what we really want to do today is teach you guys about how to work with the brain and the nervous system to interrupt that cycle and to create new change, especially this time of year when we're all really thinking about creating those changes. So Matt Bush is here with us today. He is the founder of Next Level Neuro. He's one of our lead educators in the Neuro-Somatic Intelligence program, and he's going to be talking to you guys about your brain and habit change and how that works in the brain. And then for those of you who don't know me, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm the founder of Brain-Based Wellness, which is a membership platform where we train the nervous system intentionally to have resilience, to be able to change, and also the founder of NSI, the Neuro-Somatic Intelligence Coaching Certification, and the co-host of Trauma Rewired podcast. And today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to work with the nervous system and the body to help process the emotions of change safely and start to move some of that through the body. And then Melanie Weller, who is our Director of Continuing Education, is also going to be here. She's a vagus nerve expert, and she's going to be talking to you about vagus nerve health, which is so vital for having the ability in our nervous system to be able to modulate between states of activation and rest so that we can recover and then positively adapt to the stress of change. So this is our journey for today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We have some slides and we'll get rocking and rolling. Okay. The neurology of transformation. So what we're really talking about when we talk about that ability to positively adapt to change and to know how to work with our own operating system to create that capacity for change, that is neurosomatic intelligence. It's this understanding of how your own operating system works and how to work with it to drive your change in a positive direction. So when we have the ability to recognize how nervous system inputs, because we're taking in all this information all the time through our eyes, through the balance system in our ear, and our inner ear, our body mapping system, the system inside of us that tells our brain what's going on. We're taking in all these sensory stimulus, these points of data all of the time. And when we can start to recognize how those inputs are affecting our nervous system, how our brain is interpreting that information, does it have accuracy, clarity, does it feel safe? Then we can see how those inputs and that interpretation are driving our outputs. Our outputs are our behaviors, our felt sense, our experiences of pain or health or presence. And so when we have neurosomatic intelligence, we know how our nervous system is affected by the inputs coming in, how to create change in those inputs in order to get new outputs. And it's really, the whole system is a combination of applied neurology, having really practical, actionable tools to work with your nervous system to rehabilitate and create more health in the nervous system. Somatics, being able to process things through the body like stress and emotions for more resilience, vagus nerve health, and then brain health, improving our brain function through intentional training and stimulus. And when we're talking about neurosomatic intelligence, we're really looking at the nervous system as doing three things primarily. One, receiving inputs. So just like I talked about, we're taking in data all of the time from the world around us, our environment, and from inside of ourselves, from inside of our own body. We're taking in all of these inputs, and then our brain interprets those inputs. And at the end of the day, it's really asking a very important question: safe or unsafe? And how we make that decision is going to then determine the output that we experience. And Matt's going to talk to you more about the different outputs that you can experience, but really thinking about everything in our life, every behavior, every action is an output of our nervous system, every movement, everything. And so when we work from this NSI framework, instead of just looking at the outputs and thinking like, here's the behavior I want to change, here's the experience I want to change, and cognitively relying on just our cerebral cortex, our higher order thinking systems to create that change and like pushing through with our willpower. Instead, we're flipping back over here to look at the inputs. How is our system taking in information from the world? And how can we rehabilitate those input systems to give clearer, more accurate information to our brain and our nervous system? And then how can we work with our brain to interpret those signals, again, with more accuracy, with more safety? And then by focusing on these inputs and interpretation, we then allow a new output to become possible. So the focus is not on the output, but we're really going back over here and looking at the inputs to drive that change in the outputs. Okay, I'm gonna let Matt take you into a little more about the brain.
So as we're focusing today really on transformation, like the intro to inputs, interpretation, and output is going to be helpful, but we want to come back to this idea of both habits and skills that we've developed. Okay, so starting with the neurology of habits, basically habits are well-worn patterns of behavior. Okay, they can be initiated and performed by the back of the brain, not the front. So very little cognitive thought is required. Basically, either like the back of the cortex itself or the cerebellum can go, yeah, okay, let's do this. And it can initiate that action. And then we don't have to stay engaged cognitively to complete the behavior that makes up that habit, right? So if you have a habit of twirling your hair or biting your nails or, you know, really anything, doodling on a page, like you can do most of the habits like that mindlessly. But then we also have habitual ways of responding to situations, like circumstances in our external environment or circumstances of how we're feeling inside of our own body. And the way that we programmed our behaviors, both psychologically and physically, can be defined as habit formation. We've built and then supported and insulated these neural pathways by using them again and again and again. Okay, so habits can be harmful or helpful, to long-term health, but we want to start looking at them as an output. So if there's something that you want to change, you're thinking of transforming here in 2024, instead of thinking I'm trying to change how I am or who I am or a part of me, maybe start from the output my brain is creating. It gives you a little and a little bit to feel how things can begin to shift. Okay. An interesting question around these habits is, why did the brain choose to fire that behavior in response to the situation? Or in other words, what does it gain, right? What's the brain going to get out of this? Why would it do that? Why would it choose that action? And the answer to that question usually comes back to two distinct possibilities. Number one, it's going to help increase my odds of survival, like it's going to keep me safe. Number two, the outcome of that behavior is the most predictable for me. Okay, it's either survival based or it's based on prediction of outcome. The reason those are so important is because the brain is very, very interested in the conservation of energy and almost like knowing the outcome before it happens, right? Like as kids, we love to try new things and explore, but as adults, some of us get a little hesitant and it becomes harder and harder to change things that have been built into our system. So when we talk about changing things, the way we view it is that everything is a skill. Okay, so pop over for us. Everything is a skill. And this comes from this idea that we teach everything we've ever felt or done has been a result of brain activity. That means physical sensations, emotional feelings, your thoughts, like everything that has been an input is all sent to your brain and processed by your brain. And everything that's been an output comes from your brain. Every word that comes out of your mouth, your entire lifetime, comes out of your own brain. Every action you take comes from your brain. Every skill and habit you develop comes from your brain. Okay. So everything you've done, everything you are, is a result of your brain function, which means really everything in the body is controlled or regulated at some level by the nervous system. Okay. Like everything is under the umbrella of neurological control. Some of it under direct control, some of it associated with or kind of secondary regulation. It's all under this umbrella. And we know from applied neurology that the nervous system can be trained. Okay, by adding inputs and changing neural pathways, we can get different outputs. So you put these ideas together and what you come up to is, look, a skill is basically anything the human body does that can be trained. Some skills you're born with, like maybe breathing. You do that one pretty quickly after birth, but you can still train it, right? You can improve it by doing breath work and respiratory training. Some skills you had to learn, like speaking, whatever spoken language you first learned, that was a skill you had to learn. Writing is a skill. Walking is a skill that you had to learn. All of your movements are skills that your brain had to learn at some point. But all of that stuff can still be trained. And then we include also emotional regulation can be trained, goal setting, achievement. And on the flip side, like just because something is skill and can be trained doesn't mean it's always a good thing. Like addictions are basically trained behaviors. Self-regulating behaviors are skills that we've trained. Our ability to dissociate or be distracted. The outputs that we create to protect ourselves are also skills. Okay. So the whole thing about applied neurology and this neurosomatic intelligence is that you have the ability to change anything by retraining it. You can transform anything that your nervous system regulates. But unless you really understand how the nervous system works, that can be really hard. Okay. So here's where it all comes down to a point of why habit change is so hard from a neurological perspective. Okay. So in the graphic at the top, what you can see, this is what's called the habit loop of unwanted habits. And several authors have written about this recently. James Clear writes about this in Atomic Habits. BJ Fogg writes about this in his book called Tiny Habits. It's been all over social media for the last several years. But basically, number one, like there's a cue. There's something, we're prompted. Okay? Number two, the cue creates a craving. When we see it, we want something. Then the response, number three, is like the action. And number four is that we get a pleasurable reward. And then it goes on and we see another cue and the loop keeps continuing, okay? But where the nervous system hijacks behavior and makes it difficult to change habits, if you look over at the right side, you got this picture of a brain sitting at the dinner table, about to have a lovely meal of oxygen and glucose. Those are the two types of fuel that your brain needs. And what occurs, especially when we get into repetitive habits of behavior that we may not find optimal, is that very often we don't have enough oxygen and glucose in our system. We don't, essentially saying we don't have enough energy to avoid the action, which in the graphic is called the response. And we're kind of like almost blindly chasing the reward. Our cognitive brain is thinking, I want to stop doing that. I don't want to do that anymore. That's harmful or damaging or making my life more difficult. Or we're like, oh, I wanted to start doing this new thing because it would be so good for me. It'd be so healthy, but I keep failing to bring myself to do it. It's so hard. In both cases, it often comes down to the fact that our brain is going to a predictable behavior that it already knows, because that saves energy, rather than engaging in a new behavior that's good or avoiding a behavior that we know is possibly harmful. Okay, it's all about conservation of energy. So let's look at the text really quick. The brain is basically a prediction machine. It's always predicting what's going on around you, what's going to happen next, and it's also making the prediction that Elizabeth talked about a minute ago of whether it's going to be safe or unsafe in the very next moment. So it uses its prior knowledge of the world, your previous experiences, and the current information you're receiving, like your sensory data, to generate a hypothesis about the meaning of what's going on around me. Okay, what does all this incoming sensory information mean? And then this hypothesis, or you could call it a prediction, not actually the sensory inputs themselves, but the prediction or the hypothesis is what gives rise to our perception of the world. So here's a very, very important point. If you're taking notes, write this down. What you perceive isn't always what is. Okay, what you perceive isn't always what is. What you perceive is what you predict. Elizabeth, we can save that one for social media, I think. Like what you perceive is what you predict. It's not what's really there. Your brain is predicting that you're going to hear something from your partner, and then you get into a conversation, you're like, see, I knew that you were going to say that. You're predicting that a certain meeting is going to go away, and you get to the meeting, you're like, oh, I knew it was going to happen this way. You're predicting you're going to feel a certain way at the end of the day, and guess what? You feel that way. You have the perception that matches your prediction from the first place, okay? So here's the thing. The interpretation and decision-making around our choices to make a different choice costs a lot of energy, because we're getting out of the back of the brain, which runs on autopilot, and we're bringing decisions back to the frontal lobe, which is very expensive. So it's costly, okay? Habit change, therefore, costs a huge amount of energy. And the last bullet point down there is when we're trying to make changes, we're going, okay, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to have willpower. I'm going to hold myself to this. I'm going to do it. But we still are basing all of those decisions on what sensory inputs we're able to receive and what predictions that we've been making. And so the more ambiguous the inputs, like if I have a poorly functioning sensory system, my visual system is having difficulty, my vestibular system, my auditory inputs, my smell, if any of those are having trouble, then I don't rely on the input. I rely on my previous experiences, and those are just going to reinforce the old predictions. Okay, everybody follow? Nod your head like this if you're still with me. So our brain falls back to old predictions and old ways of thinking and behaving because it's less costly and it's more predictable. Okay, so when we actually look at the inputs and outputs, let's go to the next slide real quick. We use this idea of a threat bucket. We use this idea of a threat bucket to describe how your brain is going to respond. Okay, so the inputs go into the bucket. Well, the bucket kind of represents your brain. It's taking in sensory data, sensory inputs, picking up all of these things. And all of these in the bucket represent threats, Okay, so your brain is cataloging and adding all the threats that you're faced with during the day. It doesn't really differentiate between physical, emotional, psychological, relational threats. Just for your survival brain, threat is threat. Okay, so these go into the bucket and they start to add up. And what happens is your brain is like, look, if the threat becomes so big that I can't adapt and change and compensate to protect myself, like if I can't handle it, the threat's probably going to take me out. It doesn't want that to happen. So that's where you have this little black dotted line, like a threshold. And if the threat level gets higher than that, you get this overflow to the side of the bucket, the outputs. So number one, those outputs are protective in nature. That's your brain trying to protect you and go, hey, there's something going on that I'm perceiving as threatening in my external environment, within my body, my internal environment, in my relationships, could be in any of those areas. It's going, I need to protect myself. So these are all protective outputs. And secondly, these are also working as communication or signals from our brain to our consciousness that say, you got to do something different. Like I'm trying to get your attention so that you'll change your behavior. Right? Does having physical pain change your behavior? Yes or no? Yep. Does anxiety change your behavior? Depression, panic attacks, procrastination? All of those things definitely will shift how you behave in order for your brain to get your attention with a signal and begin to protect you. But here's the coolest thing about this model. If we can lower the overall threat level back below that dotted line, the outputs go away. There's no reason for them to exist anymore. And that's what we do by changing the inputs, okay? Let's go to that next one. We want to take a little more look at the outputs before we go back to inputs, because we're going to go through several inputs today. Those are the drills and exercises we're going to try. But just on this idea of outputs, we put these all on a spectrum. On the left side is survival outputs, on the right side is performance outputs. And the deal is your brain can really only create one side of the spectrum at a time. Like you're not going to have your highest level of performance while you're also in physical pain, right? Because the pain is stealing some of your energy and some of your attention and some of your movement. You're not going to have great performance. You're not going to have really clear thinking if you're also struggling with anxiety at the same time. It kind of gets in the way. So whether your brain is going to choose a survival output or a performance output depends on how high your threat is in that threat bucket. Okay, so what we're going to do on the rest of the call is go through a few more concepts, but a lot of exercises that are different inputs we can test to see if we can help you to lower your threat level and experience what that feels like. Okay, all right. So what we want to do to know if it's working is an assessment and then an immediate reassessment. All right. So we can check on the state of the nervous system immediately. It's the fastest system in the body. It changes almost instantly. So we're able to actually check in on that and see what's happening. And those of you who have done like muscle testing reassessments or movement reassessments, this is going to be really familiar for you. If you're not in kind of the physical training world, but if you're more in, any kind of a psychological field, emotional coaching, talk therapy, those worlds, this might be kind of new and different, but just go with it. Like just feel it in your body with us, okay? So let's look at the actual reassessment we're going to do. The one we're going to use on the call is just a body rotation, all right? So if you want to do this with us, go ahead and stand up. You're going to use this throughout the call. You just find a spot on the floor that you know you can come back to, right? So kind of mark where you're standing. Your feet just need to be down underneath your hips. They don't have to be touching side by side, but just feet underneath your hips. Arms are going to go up, palms touching right in front of you. And you're just going to allow your whole body to rotate here. You want to see how far around you can rotate. Let your spine rotate, your hips, your pelvis, your legs. The only rule is you have to keep your feet flat on the floor. Okay? And take your head with you. You want to look at where you're rotating. So as I rotate around, I can see my hands are pointing back to the corner of the room that I'm in. That's to my left. And to my right, they're pointing back to the middle of the wall, and I have a little mark there that I can see. So you want to mark and know how far did I rotate? Where did I go on the left? Where did I go on the right? Okay, that's the baseline assessment. Now we're going to do a little exercise, and then we're going to immediately reassess the same movement and see if it changes. So our first exercise we'll do is smell. So you need to grab your smelly stuff, whatever that is. I've got a little vial of essential oil here. So in a moment, when you do this, you'll have your eyes closed, and we only want to smell this on one nostril at a time. Okay, so all of you who just picked up your vial and took a big smell, just hang on a second, right? So we're going to test this by closing one nostril, plug the nostril. I'm going to hold up the vial underneath, and then I'm also going to tap on that side. Maybe I can hold it with the side that I'm plugging my nostril. I'm going to tap and smell. Maybe just 2 to 3 inhales. And you want to ask yourself, can I identify the smell, and how strong is it on a scale of 1 to 10? For me, this is very noticeable. It's kind of like a woodland pine scent. I would score it like an 8 out of 10. It's very strong. So if I reassess my rotation, unfortunately, that one makes me a lot tighter. Whew, and it kind of made me out of breath. Not great. So here's what that means. If my reassessment got worse, body movement got tighter, that's like my brain putting its foot on the brake pedal and going, hold on there, buddy, slow down a little bit. I don't feel super safe right now. Okay, so range of motion gets worse because my threat actually increased a little bit from smelling that on my left side. It wasn't good for me individually. For you, if your range of motion got better, that's like you smelled it on that side, and then your brain took its foot off the brake pedal. It's like, yeah, you can drive a little faster. You can move a little bit more because smelling that on that side made me feel safer. Okay? So I'm going to try it on the other side. Hopefully I'll get a better response. So I'm going to plug my left nostril, smell on the right. Now, for me, it's much weaker on that side. It's maybe only a 3 out of 10. I can barely tell what it is, but I'm going to reassess. Wow, I can turn all the way around 180 degrees. Much, much better than my initial baseline assessment. And my body even has like this, almost like a full body tingle, like an activation that happened. My energy just went woo. Okay. So on my right side, I get a great reassessment. On my left side, it wasn't so good. What that tells me is I can now save this exercise of smell on the right as an activation tool that I can continue to use throughout the day. That's going to become one of my personal high payoff exercises that I can go back to activate and regulate my nervous system. The left side that wasn't so good for me, I'm just going to set that one aside. I'm not going to use that right now, but I'm going to keep the right because that one was pretty awesome.
Okay, awesome. So if you guys would, feel free to share in the chat how that was for you. If you have some questions about it, did you get better or worse? And again, we're just gathering information. We're just learning more about what our nervous system responds well to so that we can start creating intentional stimulus that our brain and our nervous system respond positively to use those as tools as regulation and safety throughout the day. And it's always great to share a win. That's another great tool for behavior change, is to really look at your wins and to share them and to celebrate them. It'll help you get that dopamine and want to keep working with your nervous system or doing whatever it is that you want to do when you allow yourself to recognize those wins. Okay. I'm going to go on into another component of behavior change as you guys are sharing in the chat, and Matt and Melanie will keep chiming in there too. So when we're talking about creating change in our life, there's always emotions that come with habit change, right? We're creating change in many areas of our life. We're changing parts of our identity when we change our behavior and our habits. So there's fear that comes with that, fear of the unknown. There's some grief that'll come with that, right? There's a part of us that no longer is. Sometimes it has an impact on our relationships, on our daily experience. And whenever there's a little bit of change, there's always a little bit of loss, even when that change is positive. And so there's an emotional component of something that comes up with that. And there can be fear also too in how it changes our social dynamics, right? Maybe what the old behavior was something that we shared with our friend group or with a coworker or with a partner. Um, so there's fear around that rejection, the change in those social dynamics, and again, that little bit of component for grief of relational loss. And then also when we're creating change in our life, we're coming up against some of our deep core beliefs. And those beliefs are in there as protective mechanisms. They've been keeping us alive. They've been keeping our social connections or even our physical safety. So again, even when I know cognitively, I want to be more visible in the world, I want to set boundaries, I want to create different relationship patterns, there's some deep protective beliefs in there that sometimes that can bump up against. So just a really small example, say I want to say I'm going to stop watching TV late at night and reduce my screen time because I know it affects my sleep. I want to get better sleep, have healthier habits. But maybe a part of my identity is like I'm a night owl. I like spending this time in the evening winding down, and that's a huge part of who I am. Maybe like it's a time when my partner and I veg out together and we feel connection. And so if I take that away, what if I lose that time? What if these are shows that I talk with my friends about? And maybe even underneath there, there's a deep belief that it's not safe to rest and relax without that distraction of the TV. And so we have all these things that we're coming up against, and it brings up emotions inside of our body. And there's a huge component of having a healthy nervous system and a nervous system that is able to regulate and modulate, that is inextricably linked to also having the ability to process our emotions. Emotions are physiological events that occur in our body, and we're meant to cry, to shake, to scream, to make vocal sounds, to emote. And these are all ways that our system re-regulates itself and stays healthy. But for many of us, because we live in a society where that expression is not always encouraged, or maybe we learned as little children that it's not safe. It's not safe to show our anger. It's not safe to cry. Maybe it stresses out our caregivers, or we get punished. We get sent to our room. We develop these deep patterns of repression of those emotional responses because at a real survival brain level, that just doesn't feel safe. And so in order to make change lasting, we have to be able to move those emotions through the body so that we don't move back into the maladaptive repressive behaviors. If I'm using social media scrolling to block out emotions, if I'm using food to block out my emotions, or substance or whatever it is, overworking, if it's still not safe for me to process emotions and emotions are coming up with that behavior change, I'm going to go back into the repressive behaviors until I can work with my body and nervous system to create the capacity and to make the processing of those emotions safe. So we want to really practice that in small doses that are within our window of tolerance. Because if we go too much, too fast, too soon, our body moves back into those well-worn protective paths of repression. And so in NSI, we want to really learn how to regulate our nervous system and create safety in order to have the capacity to process emotions. And then to begin to do that in a minimum effective dose that feels safe for our nervous system without pushing us into those protective outputs. And then we want to have the tools, the practical, actionable tools that NSI provides that help you to re-regulate and recreate safety around that emotional expression so that you are constantly re-educating your system. It's safe. It's safe to go here and I can come back from it. I'm not going to get lost forever in this dysregulated state, not lost forever in my grief or my anger or whatever it is that I'm moving through, I have the ability to adapt and respond and come back to my present self. So we're using the tools before and after emotional processing to help create that safety and to re-educate the system that it doesn't have to go into those repressive patterns. So we're going to do a few more tools now, and then we'll just do a very small minimum effective dose of emotional processing and see if by working with our system, maybe we get a little bit of a release. So the first tool we're going to learn is called the trigeminal reset. Our trigeminal nerve is one of our cranial nerves, cranial nerve 5, and it controls a lot of the tension in our jaw. So for those of you with TMJ, or when you feel stressed, you get pain and tension here, this is a probably really good tool, but again, everybody's different. So we're going to assess and reassess. So make sure and go ahead and do another assessment. You can assess your rotation. You can assess your neck rotation, make sure it's as measurable as possible. So you look at what you're pointing to, or you look at what you see with your eyes. We want that baseline to be as measurable as possible. And then we are going to create a little bit of vibration stimulus along some of the end points of this nerve. So if you have your vibrating object, like a vibrating toothbrush or your Z-Vibe, grab that. If not, you're going to use your fingers and tap, tap, tap. Okay, so we're going to just sit up nice and tall, relax your shoulders, take a breath in, take a nice long exhale. And then we're going to start to create a little vibration along the jawline, or you can tap, tap, tap with your fingers. And just keep breathing in and out through your nose with a gentle inhale and a nice long relaxed exhale. And then we're going to move up and come horizontally directly out from the bridge of my nose. And again, I'm just creating that little bit of vibration, or I'm tap, tap, tapping with my fingers. And then I'm going to go back to my jawline. Ooh, I can hear my vocal tone dropping as I do this. That's another positive output. And then back to coming out from the bridge of the nose. Easy, gentle breaths. One more time for me. Back to the jawline. Feel the sensations. Working with the back to the bridge of the nose, working with the cranial nerves is a really nice, usually pretty gentle, pretty positive for most people tool that is very impactful. Most of our cranial nerves go right into our brainstem. A big effect on how our nervous system is feeling. And then take a breath in, take a nice long slow exhale. And then go ahead and reassess that. You could also reassess like how your jaw is feeling. Right? Our body braces a lot against emotional expression. And this is one of the big spots where we clench up, we restrict our voice, our vocals, our means of expression. So if we can use neurotools to help this area relax and come out of that braced position, it primes us for more possibility of emotional expression. If you got a negative response to that, then I want you to just go ahead and repeat the other drill that you did if it was high payoff for you, so that you're just constantly re-regulating the nervous system. It's okay if that wasn't positive for you. You can just follow it with a different high payoff tool. The next tool we're going to learn is just a little stretch of our diaphragm. With stress, trauma, we often lock up right through the center of our body, especially in the horizontal fibers. And so we're just going to help to mobilize and stretch our diaphragm a little bit so that we come again out of that braced position of the body. So what I want you to do is just start by taking your hands to the bottom of your ribs and just give yourself a little bit of sensory stimulus there. Just feeling the bottom and the sides of your rib cage. And we're going to take our hands and make an L shape. And I'm going to hook my thumbs right to the back of my rib cage. And if you want to close your eyes, you can. Otherwise, you can keep them open. And I want you to just start to try to move your breath into the back, the bottom, and the sides of your ribs. See if you can like feel your thumbs move out with your breath. Okay. You can even put a little pressure on your hands back into your ribs. Just kind of notice, is it the same between the right and the left side? And then what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in, try to expand the rib cage laterally. So the breath is moving out to the sides and into the back of the body. And as we breathe out, we're going to breathe out all the air, but I want you to try to keep your ribs wide. So I'm going to breathe in. Until I breathe out all of the air. Okay, let's do that one more time since we kind of know now what's coming. So we'll breathe in, expand the breath, and then maybe get a little quiver at the end there, a little quiver in the breath, a little quiver in the diaphragm. And then just take a breath in, take a nice, long, slow exhale. Give your nervous system a beat to adapt to that, and then reassess and see how your body responded. You could do your rotation. I'm pretty sure Matt talked about this, but change at the level of the nervous system is not only instantaneous, but it's system-wide. So even though we're working with the jaw or the diaphragm, if it's a positive bit of stimulus for you, that will impact your rotation. That will impact your vocal tone. That would impact your neck. So if it's positive, that shows up positive everywhere. It doesn't have to be just in the area that we're focused on. Okay, let us know in the chat how those went for you. And if you got a negative response, just do one of the other tools that you got a positive response for, or if you work with us regularly, one of your high payoff tools. Okay, so now hopefully we've let the body come out of a little bit of bracing. We've opened up a little through our diaphragm and our jaw, which is a place where we can really armor up against some of that release. And now we're just going to do a very short 30-second minimum effective dose practice of allowing us to feel the emotions of change in our body. So when we're starting with this, you don't need to pick something big. We want to start small within that window of tolerance, within the minimum effective dose. And whenever there's a change, there's a little bit of loss, there's a little bit of grief. So you can pick a really small change in your life to start with, something that maybe feels kind of neutral. Like for instance, I bought a new car. Since I was 16 years old, I've driven a Honda Civic. My partner was like, it's time to break that pattern. And so I got a different type of car, got a Toyota. It's a big change for me. It's positive. I feel excited about it. But there's this part of me that was like my identity. I had my little black Honda Civic for like my entire life. And so there's change there, and there's a part of that identity that isn't there. So you can pick something really small and neutral like that. The me that's getting up a little earlier, okay? And just allow yourself to think about that change for a second. Think about what was, think about what is now, and then bring your feet onto the floor. If you have your shoes on, if you could take them off, that'd be even better. And just feel your feet on the floor. And as you think about that change, just start to rub your hands together, just feeling like these are my hands. This is my body. I'm just here right now. Think about the change. If you want to close your eyes, close your eyes. You can also just keep a soft gaze if that doesn't feel safe. And then just bring your awareness to your breath. Maybe starting to feel like you're breathing into the backside of the ribs, into the space behind the heart. And just for a second, just for a tiny moment, we're going to drop into the body. So follow your breath into your body. And just begin to notice. Notice the sensations, the feeling of your ribs expanding with your breath. Maybe the feeling of your belly expanding with your breath. As you feel these sensations, is there anywhere else that your body is talking to you? Any tension, any pain, maybe a little bit of unease in the belly? What are the sensations there? And if you want, and it's possible, if you don't feel anything, that's okay. Just breathe and feel your hands. If it feels okay, place your hand on the part of your body where you maybe feel the sensations the most. And just breathe into that space. And we'll just dialogue with the body for a moment. What do you need from me? Body, how do you want me to be with you right now? Just see if anything intuitively arises. Body, it is safe to release. Just take an audible sigh, somatic sigh, breathe in. Just see if anything intuitively arises, if there's any little release, a yawn, a sigh, a tear. And then rub your hands together one more time, coming back. These are my hands. This is my body. I'm safe right here, right now. Maybe shake them out a little. Notice, do you need to vocalize something? Do you need to make a sound or a movement? And that's it. Just a little moment of seeing what comes through. And then from here, Melanie's going to take us into a little more work with the vagus nerve so that we'll again be re-regulating, recreating safety around that expression.
I love that there was a mention of vagus nerve decompression in the chat, because that's been my drug of choice for the last 20 years or so, and maybe even longer, because I've been working with treating the vagus nerve as a pinched nerve in the body for like a solid 25 years. And your vagus nerve is super cool. It goes all the way from your brainstem to your pelvis, and it is the biggest part of your parasympathetic nervous system. So it really helps us feel good. I like to call it your pleasure nerve. In most cases, it really is. And when we look at protective responses, your vagus nerve, it innervates your vocal cords, it innervates your heart, it's in your lungs, it's in your digestive system. And your body is going to protect your heart. It's very high on the protection list. If you think about things that the body wants to protect, it wants to keep your heart beating. It wants to keep your digestive system functioning. And so you can get some very intense protective responses around via the vagus nerve around your organs. So like if you think about like a stereotypical or a like the classic little old lady that's all hunched over, her body is protecting her aorta. It is curving around her aorta and her heart to protect that. And stress and trauma always affect the voice and the breath. And we experience that because we gasp, we scream, we can't scream, we stop breathing. And nobody gets stressed or traumatized and sachets down the sidewalk like a runway model. We all lock up. We give up rotation first. And we embody that stress and trauma in the transverse plane, in that horizontal, that plane on which we're rotating here. And so it shows up at the base of our skull and our diaphragms and our vocal cords and our pelvic floors. And you have other horizontal structures in the body. So rotation is usually the first thing that we protect. And at least with my profession, it's often the last thing that we try to give back to people. And if you think about creating safety via the map in your brain, your internal body has a lot of real estate in your brain in terms of how much information it's getting. And when you can really have a nice clear map, when that vagus nerve communicates very clearly, and I will tell you, in going back to Elizabeth's discussion on grief, for me, mechanically in the body, grief and suicide ideation show up almost identically in the body. And all of the compression points really lock down, and people cannot get good information to their brain, or at least unretractable grief and suicide ideation mechanically you can measure that objectively in the body. And so getting your vagus nerve decompressed is really is really important. So we can go to the next slide. All right. So I really like to assess breath. And one way to do that is to put a hand on the front of your chest and a hand comfortably on the back, as high up as you comfortably can. And take a couple deep breaths. And just pay attention to how your hands are moving. Like, do they both go straight up and down? Does your front one move and your back one stay still? Or do they both expand with equal excursion front to back? That's always the goal, to get some equal excursion. But most of us don't do that if we haven't done a little bit of nervous system work to get there. And okay, so go to the next slide and we'll do. So this is the position. And if you're standing, you can do this standing, but you want to cross your left ankle in front of your right. You can do it in standing as long as you have the balance to do it in standing. But sit up nice and straight towards the edge of the chair. Cross your left ankle in front of your right. Take your right hand and put it across your body and your left hand behind your head. And now I want you to inhale for a count of 5, hold for a count of 8, and exhale for a count of 13. You can do that. You can count as fast as you want, depending on your how easy or difficult that is for you. But inhale into the backside of your heart, hold, and then exhale. In all humans, the right side of the diaphragm has more muscle mass than the left. So theoretically, the right side will always win. And this helps to bring more balance into your diaphragm. What happens when the right side is winning is your diaphragm goes from being a dome to being more flat. So this exercise domes your diaphragm up, and it tends to decompress more vagus nerve points than just at your diaphragm and your heart level. And then after you've done a few repetitions of that, go ahead and retest. And if you liked this exercise and want to do it later, you could exhale with a hum or an om.
You done with that,
I'm
Melanie?
done.
You want me to
Yep.
go back? Okay.
Yep. Nope. That's great.
Um,
Let me know how you did in the chat with it.
yeah, let us know how you guys are feeling in the chat with that. So Jennifer Wallace is here, by the way. She's with us from Trauma Rewired, so you guys can say hi to her. And so we'll open it up for questions. I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit more about NSI, as I know many of you are here interested in that. So our next cohort is enrolling. It starts at the end of March. Enrollment goes through March 15th. And we'll have the kickoff call probably March 26th, and then the first lecture will be on the 28th. So it's a 12-week course. We have lectures on Thursdays with me and Matt and Melanie, Amanda Smith, who works in traumatic brain injury, and Jennifer Wallace. And then we also have coaching calls once a week where you guys get to practice the tools, do case studies, really integrate the work into your businesses. It's an ICF accredited course. And we also work with lots of other professionals to help them use the course for CEs for their different licensure. Included is also membership on the Brain-Based site. So you have a place to go really practice these exercises in community, weave the tools into your nervous system. So you get 3 months of that. You can get access to Melanie Weller's vagus nerve decompression course. And this round, we are also including an extra month of business development for everyone in the course, which will be 6 modules and then 3 live calls with Carrie Montgomery, who's a business and brand expert and strategist. She's also an NSI practitioner. So she really knows how to work with you guys to bring this out into your business. So we will be sending you lots more information about the course, and we'll open it up for questions about that there, but we are enrolling now. We're ready to rock and roll for the spring and would love to work with a lot of you guys on that. The Price for the course is $6,800. We have 12 and 6-month payment plans available. It's geared for practitioners, for coaches, for therapists, for movement practitioners, who want to bring this nervous system work into the good work that they're doing to create bigger change at this foundational level for people. But sometimes individuals go through it, but it's mostly a course for practitioners. Other ways that you can work with us is if you are an individual who wants to work on training their nervous system and have a bunch of these tools for behavior change, emotional resilience, and just better nervous system health, you can join us at brainbased.com and you can get 2 free weeks of nervous system training there with us at rewiretrial.com. You can also check out all of Matt's different offerings at Next Level Neuro. They have a great COVID and neuro recovery program, a strength training program for working with your nervous system for strength. And then you can find more of Melanie Weller's offerings at melanieweller.com. Fearless Presence, her vagus nerve decompression work. She's doing all kinds of great workshops. So there's ways to connect with us all individually too. Okay, so here we go. Questions that everyone has. And Jennifer, would you put your consult call link in the chat? I don't know if you're still here, but if people want to book
Pop
a
it in there
discovery
right
call with
now, yeah.
Jennifer, they can do that as well. Yes, we have scholarships available. We have BIPOC partial scholarships. We have LGBTQ partial scholarships. And they reduce the cost of the course to $4,800. And then we also have the payment plans available as well.
Elizabeth, there is a question about nurses taking the course and can nurses take the course and can it count for their CEUs for RNs?
I'll answer that.
Nurses
Possibly.
good.
Yeah, very, very possible. I've had physical therapists submit it and get it approved. We're working to get it approved with more medical boards. But if you have the option to submit a course with the objectives and references and everything with your board for outside approval, like I can do that and it costs me like $25 or something to do that, then yes, you can have all the information to be able to get that credentialed, and no one has said no yet.
Yeah, we've had many nurses take the course and bring it in. And so, yeah, we've had pretty good success with other certifying agencies. And Melanie, do you want to speak to Maria's asking about licensed psychotherapist?
Not that I know of, but I will, I can
We've
think
had
of
licensed
one.
psychotherapists take the course. I don't
We've
know if
had
they've
many
submitted it
licensed
for
psychotherapists
CEs.
take the course. I don't know that if they've submitted it for CEs or not. I haven't heard those stories, but we will absolutely provide that information. And because we have Victor Jones on faculty, who is a licensed mental health professional, like that's also, we're working to get more of this credentialed. The challenge is that most of it is state to state, not a national credentialing. And so it can be very labor intensive. So at the moment, we are just giving you all of the information to submit it to your board.
I'm going to have to jet everyone. Thank you for being here. Elizabeth, Melanie,
Thank
thanks.
you,
Jennifer,
Matt.
thanks for being here. Support. Love you all. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, what other questions do you guys have? Not just about the course or credentialing, but do you have questions about some of the tools, the practices that happened today? We are here for it. I got all afternoon open for you. More about the schedule of the course. Yes. So the course is, and if you book a discovery call with me, I'll send you the syllabus so you can have the exact dates and times. But the course is, we meet for a live lecture every Thursday from noon to 2 Central Time. That usually runs a little bit over with Q&A. So I would book out like 2 hours and 15 minutes for that. Every lecture is live and it's recorded. It's put into your course the next day, and you guys have lifetime access to all of that material, the lecture recordings, the course worksheets. We have worksheets for every tool that you'll learn, slides, course manual, all that kind of stuff. course manual that's really just broken down into sheets. Then we have coaching calls. Those are going to be on Tuesday at noon. And the second day is not yet determined. It's probably going to be Wednesday, but I'm waiting to hear back from Amanda Smith on that exactly. And those are an hour long, again, where you really practice the tools, you do case studies, you review the content from the lecture, you get together and experience the work in community, get to know the people in your cohort. Those are recorded, also live for lifetime access in your modules. We do practice pods where you guys get together with other members of your cohort. And those are, you can pick the time that works for you and you get together weekly. And again, practice the tools, practice teaching, develop your eye as a practitioner. And all of that runs for 12 weeks. It will end mid-June. And then after that, the business development component starts. And that goes for about another month. And that's recorded and put into your module as well. So you have lifetime access to that. Okay, so if you don't have an existing practice for case studies, nobody has to come with a case study. The coaches themselves will bring case studies. If you guys have a case study that you want us to bring up in a coaching call, you can email that to us and then the coach will take you guys through it and go through it together. But a lot of times it's just the coach saying, okay, if, for example, somebody comes in with these outputs, or you're working on somebody that has high, these are the things that they come in with, a high ACE score, they're having migraines, they're this, and we're working on this. What are some tools that we could use, and work through it together so that you guys get a better idea of how to do that.
So there's a question from Rebecca about she's a sleep stress and leadership coach and wants to know more about using the drills and working with clients. And absolutely, you can use these drills not just for moments of stress, but to really train your system to have a whole new level, a whole new baseline, so that you can really show up. My brand is Fearless Presence, and I work with a lot of people around stage fright, whether that's in the boardroom, Zoom room, family room, and sometimes even the bedroom. So you can, and as you do this practice and clarify all those maps in your brain, you can show up in new ways, and people receive you in new ways from a, I will just say for myself, people take me way more seriously than they did 15 years ago because I show up differently. I have more fearless presence. I command that. And so from a leadership standpoint, it is very good. And often the things that we really desire, our goals, and the things that we think are really good for us are threats at the level of the nervous system. And you have to repattern that to get what you want.
Absolutely. And Melanie touched on a really important thing too, that it's not just using these tools in the moment of stress for re-regulation, though that's an important part of it, is having practical, actionable tools to help with regulation. But it's really about developing a practice, and daily nervous system hygiene, a way to work with the nervous system regularly to repattern, to rehabilitate, and to create capacity within yourself and your clients. And all of that is part of the framework that you learn. So it's part like daily practice and nervous system rehabilitation, and then part like rescue drills or high payoff drills that you use in the moment. And through the course, you'll be learning a framework of how to use which tools when, how to dose the tools appropriately for your clients, and make sure that you're working within their capacity to create positive change, because every nervous system is so unique. And we'll really break down a lot of different types of outputs. There was a question in there about does this help with mental health issues? 100%. That is the deep underlying passion of my work, is to bring nervous system literacy, awareness, and tools to mental health fields. And so that we can work at the level of the operating system, where so many of these issues are rooted in, to create change at a different level. And so as you go through the course, there are modules on insomnia and the inability to rest, and having a nervous system that is capable of having good sleep hygiene. But there's also modules on dissociation and embodiment and why it can be difficult to come into the body, how to work with the nervous system to make coming into the body and doing somatic practices possible. There's a module on anxiety. There's a module on addiction and habit change. There's a module on the inner critic and shame and working with that at the level of the brain and the nervous system. And all of this is from the neurology of these issues. Okay, what else? What other questions? Let's see. You guys want to know a little bit about the syllabus? So we really start at the beginning, developing a foundation of understanding the nervous system, what is applied neurology, what is neurosomatics, and really building out the framework of how to apply this work into your practices and how to dose the work appropriately, and just going over these big foundational concepts. Then we move into emotional processing and working with the nervous system, the brain, the body to make emotional processing safe and possible. We deal with emotional flashbacks. Then we go on to take a deeper dive into the F responses and the ways our system responds to stress, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, what's going on in the brain, in the body, in the nervous system, and what are the practical tools that we can use in these moments to repattern these responses over time. And how do we recognize these responses in our clients and know which tools to use when? And then we branch out into those bigger outputs that I was talking about, the um, understanding the inner critic, understanding relational health, understanding rest, habits, addiction, visibility and fearless presence, all of these things, then we move out to from that foundational level. Okay, any other questions? We would love to answer them. If you guys have questions about the course, about the tools, we're here for it. No? If we
Elizabeth, I
apply,
was typing an answer. Did you speak to chronic pain and autoimmune issues?
oh, no, I
There was a
didn't see
question
that
about that.
question. Okay, generally speaking, chronic pain and autoimmune are deeply linked to the health of our nervous system. So from a neurosomatic perspective, pain is an output of our nervous system. It's a protective output of our nervous system. Like Matt was talking about, when I experience pain, all of these outputs are behavior change tools of my brain to get me to stay safer in that moment. So if my stress level is really high because of chronic dysregulation, because of deficits in my different input systems, remember that threat bucket, it's overflowing. And pain is a great way for, in that moment, my survival mind, which lives only in the present, to get me to take smaller steps, to work out with less intensity. Maybe I even go lay down for the day. I pull the covers over my head. I call in sick to the high stress job. And in that moment, that is safer for my nervous system because there's less stimulus coming in. There's less water flowing into the bucket. And so when I'm walking around at max capacity with my bucket overflowing, it's very possible that pain is an output that my brain is going to generate a lot of the time to try to get me to get less input coming in to my nervous system, less stress, and stay safer. Because that chronic stress load, our nervous system and our brain is intelligent and understands too much stress for too long is dangerous. That leads me into autoimmune. Too much stress for too long is dangerous because it leads to disease, and especially autoimmune disease. So, or all kinds of disease, but autoimmune is very linked to this. So if we have a nervous system that is dysregulated and stuck in a chronic stress state all of the time, that is very linked to the function of our immune system. If I'm in a state of hypervigilance, that goes not just into my behavior in the external world, but also inside of my body. My body is predicting a lot of threat and responding with threat at the immune level as well, right? So I'm constantly sending out these little proteins, these messengers that are looking for bacteria, for foreign invaders. My system is looking for problems and invaders in the system. And if I keep sending that out, I'm constantly sending that signal. Eventually, my body starts to find things to react to. Could be my own tissue, could be other types of proteins, could be like gluten, could be other things. We also have higher levels of inflammation because that is a protective response of our nervous system when we're preparing to be possibly injured. It's part of that fight flight response is to produce inflammation in the body, because if you're going to fight or you're going to run, you might get injured. And so at a really physical level, we are priming ourselves for these disease states when we stay stuck in a constant state of dysregulation. Does that answer that, Melanie? Do you want to chime in on that a little bit?
I think you answered that very well. Yes, it's all just really deeply. Have spent many years with people with autoimmune disorders, and it's it is absolutely possible to repattern that. Like they've gotten themselves pretty deep in their stress bucket at that point, but but yes, everything Elizabeth said.
Yep. And all allergies relate to that. Peanut allergies, everything, our reactions to stuff. And I'm not saying like do some tools and then go eat a peanut if you have a severe peanut allergy. Don't do that. But our reactions to this, I'm celiac, and I do have like a great hope that one day I'll just be able to eat gluten after enough regulation and enough stress and emotional processing over time. Right now I can't, but I will tell you that my flare-ups are very, very different from when I was living in a state of chronic stress. My system did not have the capacity to handle it when I would ingest the substance that it perceived as an invader. Now, like if it happens sometimes, it's not great, but it doesn't take me out for days. It's a very different response, and that I know that my body and my immune system and my flare-ups are all directly linked to my stress load. And when I'm in a high stress time and I'm not processing the stress and I'm not working with my nervous system, I will experience those outputs much more intensely than if I'm constantly in my practices of regulation, stress processing, working with my nervous system to increase capacity. It's a very different experience. We do a lot of work with freeze and working directly with the brain. There's a question here about freeze response and the nervous system to be able to mobilize, to be able to upregulate, to restore fuel and activation to the areas of the brain that are getting turned offline in those freeze responses. And the way NSI approaches it is we're really using practical, actionable tools to create sensory stimulus that is communicating directly with the nervous system. So the language of our nervous system is sensory inputs. It doesn't speak English, French, German, Spanish. It speaks through sensory inputs. And so when I can start to communicate with my nervous system and my brain and the language, my old brain and the language that it understands, I can start to impact change at the level of my physiology, at the level of my nervous system function, getting fuel and activation up to my frontal lobe, working to change the way my brain is functioning. So rather than like trying to force myself out of the freeze state or just having to be completely shut down with it, I can take these very small, gentle, subtle ways to work with the nervous system to start creating regulation and activation that then allows mobilization to become possible.
So Tamara asked a question about, she works in organizational change, and this building NSI tools, we do have people that have worked in within corporate environments, and using these tools to restructure, like to build them into how you run a meeting, allows you to have really productive, amazing communication within your organization, and learning them, using them to help have difficult conversations. And so there are lots of applications within the corporate environment And like I said, you know, people like you might be working with somebody who wants to advance to another level, and that, but at the level of their nervous system, their promotion is a threat. Or you might have a team that just communicates really poorly, and we all co-regulate with each other. That's just a, uh, that's just it's just nervous system dysregulation within a group, and you can absolutely use these exercises to help create coherence within a group, so that you get better communication, that you get better teamwork.
Yeah, we have a lot of our participants that work at the organizational level to bring nervous system literacy, nervous system practices, a language of nervous system health into organizations. We've done some trainings with various organizations, first responders, police force, and it works very much. It's really beneficial in creating organizational change. An organization runs so differently when the people who work there understand how the nervous system works and how to work with their nervous system. It really creates a whole different dialogue and a way of communicating with one another. Yeah, it makes a nice organization to work for sure. We've had some of our participants are, CEOs of bigger organizations that then have brought this framework into for their whole staff and their company, and it's really changed the dynamics of the organization. What else? Any other questions for us, you guys? Thank you all so much for being engaged. I thank you so much for all of you that stayed through the whole hour. That was incredible. And we love getting the opportunity to connect with you. You'll get some emails following up for discovery calls. Again, if you're just an individual wanting to work with your own nervous system, go to rewiretrial.com to get your free 2 weeks of nervous system training. Start to experience that in your body. Book a call with Jennifer. You'll get some emails with some more consult call links. We're here for it. So we're open for enrollment. We'd love to see you all soon. Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you all. Mwah.